Hello, I'm Jenya Delima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole-person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. Theme may not be the first element that comes to mind when we approach writing or creating a new story, but it's often the glue that holds it all together. Here to say just what theme is and what it isn't, and to tell us about its powerful role in storytelling, is editor, author, and podcaster Alida Winternheimer. Well, first, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jenya. I'm excited to be with you.
I'm excited to have you here. It's always fun talking to another editor. Well,
hmm
so, can you start by defining what the word theme is?
Sure. Where to dive in? I love theme. It's one of my favorite craft topics. So when we think about our story, we've got three driving forces through any narrative, especially long form fiction. So thinking about novel writing. So plot, character, and theme. And the way I like to define theme is if we think of plot, it's the tangible stuff our story is about, right? It's the things that happen on the stage of the page. So if you think of your characters as actors in a theater, they can actually perform and speak the plot stuff of our story. And theme is all of the intangible stuff that our story is about. It's the aspect of the story that sheds light on what it means to be a human being, on our lived experience, on relationships, all of that about, right? That you can't perform, that has to be understood through the meaning depicted by the plot and the characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you think that some feel intimidated when talk turns to theme, or they're even asked what their theme is?
Mm. Well, great question. I think it's because a lot of writers don't think about theme from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They think of it as something that emerges while they write. And while that's often true, it's not always true. I've had a lot of writers that I've worked with who are halfway through a second or third draft and they still can't quite pinpoint what their theme is, or they think they have it, but they aren't sure how it's being expressed on the page. And then they get a little uncertain. And should I change my theme? Do I need to revise my story to express something different? And if you aren't writing a theme driven story, right? If your theme is in support of your plot or your character driver, then it's easy to kind of leave it in the wings
Mm-hmm.
and not deal with it until later. So I think that's what creates that hesitation or intimidation when people do start to think about it.
Well, what do you think some of the misconceptions are about theme, or even writing to include a theme?
Well, one of the misconceptions is that you can just ignore it and let it happen. You
Too
know,
bad.
I always advise against that. Think about it at the beginning. And when you're in that pre-writing developmental stage, you don't need to lock everything in. It
Right.
doesn't have to be set in stone. It can develop and emerge. But if you get clear on what you think your theme is, then as you're shaping your story and weaving together all of the threads of your narrative, you've got intentionality and purpose.
Do you think someone can include a theme without realizing that they've included a theme? So, for instance, if they are locked into what their intention or purpose is for the story, but yet they've never been able to articulate what their theme is meant to cover or what that theme would be defined by.
Sure, I think our subconscious mind does a lot of work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that sense, we might have a theme that's emerging while we write because it's present somewhere in our mind. It's present in the things that our characters have to go through to get through that story. But if you aren't clear on it, while it might emerge organically, you aren't shaping it. You aren't
Mm.
strengthening it. You aren't giving it purpose and presence on the page. And then how do you really expect your readers to relate to that intangible about to the human experience? And how much more meaning and depth can you give your work if you do approach theme with intention?
Can you give an example where a theme is used effectively either in a popular book or movie?
Yeah, so Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates is a theme-driven novel. Now it's literary fiction. It came out, I believe it was published in 1958, but it is a classic. It's still around, and it was made into a film starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. So hopefully enough people
Yep,
are
read and seen it.
great, excellent. So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So you get theme-driven fiction most often in literary fiction or contemporary fiction or women's fiction, some of those broader categories, less often in hard plot-driven fiction, like your mysteries, like your thrillers. With Revolutionary Road, if you look at that story and ask what it's about in terms of plot, well, we've got this young married couple with two kids who move into the suburbs in mid-century America, and they decide they're fed up. They want to revive their dream of moving to Paris now that the kids are a little older. So, in terms of plot, what can be performed on the stage, it's will they or won't they get to Paris? Will they successfully reshape their lives in such a way that they can escape humdrum middle America and go live an exciting dream life in Europe, right?
Hmm.
Very straightforward. But that's not what compels us to read that story and care about those characters. When you think, why do I care about that story? It's not because I really want to see whether or not they can go to France.
Right.
So the theme of this story is thinking in those intangible terms that expose something about the human experience. It's what does it mean to settle? Do we give up too much of ourselves, our dreams, our identity in order to live the status quo and do what's expected of us? Right?
Hmm.
And if you know how that story ends, it's tragic. It's not a happy ending. So then Yeats poses this question for us and he answers it through his character's journey. And that answer is yes, we absolutely sacrifice too much
Mm.
when we stop pursuing what we want out of life and who we really think we are in order to fit in for that middle America existence. And then as readers, we look at that and we are prompted to apply that question to our own lives.
Hmm.
Am I living the life I want to live? Am I settling? Could I do better? Is it time to revive a dream? Right? So that's how theme-driven narrative connects with readers and performs, right? What it's meant to do in the world, as opposed to something like a thriller where we're going for a ride and we're having fun.
Yes. Well, could you walk us through maybe a little bit deeper, step by step, how theme then interacts with each of those elements, like you were just saying, with the character and the choices they make, but maybe using the example of this book slash movie just to give some stronger examples?
Hmm. Yeah, so I actually have a workshop all about
Oh
this.
gosh, yes.
Yeah, but I did not prepare for this question. So off the top of my head here, when you know what you're writing and you intentionally choose your driver, plot, character, or theme, you're still going to have the other drivers present and functioning in your story. But the goal is to make them support your main driver, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we've got a plot-driven story and the theme is second or even third in that collective of drivers, then so I've got my plot arc and then I've got my character arc. And for theme, I might say, well, what is my protagonist relationship to supporting characters? How do those subplots affect and complicate my main plot? And how can theme be expressed through that narrative and through those relationships? It's hard to talk in intangibles.
That's why I think it helps people who are new to the concept, or again, they might have an understanding of it, but they might not realize how well they already understand it. When we do take an example like this and say, so here, for instance, we see character A did this, this, and this, that supported the theme in this way. Whereas if they had done X, Y, or Z instead, we would have been drifting away from the theme and it wouldn't have all been as cohesive as it should have been. Just
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, if you don't mind, I can use one of my own books
oh yeah,
as an
of course.
example, just because I know it well.
Yeah, well, that only makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So in Murder in Skog, it's a ghost story murder mystery, so definitely plot driven as defined by the genre. And you can have multiple themes, but have one that you're focused on that you're
Right, your
writing
central
to,
theme.
right? Yes, have one that's central that you're intentional about. And then those other themes are the things that can kind of emerge that connect with readers and they can think about. So it's a haunted house story. So my protagonist, Jess, buys an old farmhouse. It's a great bargain. Turns out it's haunted. Now, she bought that farmhouse because she went through a divorce. Her ex kept their home. She's moving and starting over. So one of the themes is this idea of home and having roots. And, having that place you can hang your hat and feel safe and nest and be nurtured and all of those things. So it makes sense in plot terms that I've got a woman who's newly single who just got displaced from her home, as happens in divorce, right? Lots of turmoil about that. That's all backstory. But we learn about it in the first pages when she's arriving at this haunted house. Now, this new home she's setting up is threatened by the ghost. So you see how just by creating that scenario that she left for this haunted house story, I'm writing my plot and my theme together so that that comes forward,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, are there any signs to look for that would indicate a theme might be forced?
mm. Well, I think if you hand your book to your critique group or your beta readers and they aren't picking up on your theme, right? There's a disconnect between what you think your theme is and what readers are able to find in it. Maybe you're forcing it. If you are writing a scene to try to put that theme front and center and
Mhm.
get it in front of your readers, and it's not organic to the rest of the narrative, it's not flowing well with your plot and character arcs, you're probably forcing it. If you think that you're writing a theme driven story and it's more of an issue based story, right? And you're using your fiction as a platform to try to get people to think
Uh,
about something, then you're using your novel as a pulpit, right? As a soapbox. Instead of really writing theme, theme comes out through a lot of subtext, through a lot of dialogue, through a lot of emotion. It's that resonance we have with the story. Like in Scott Hall, I never tell readers, that the story is about home
right.
because it's a plot driven story. I'm more concerned with the plot and the character, but I want it to be present so that when her home is threatened, maybe subconsciously through that
Mhm.
subtext, through the scenarios, readers sense that threat.
Yeah.
Is that
Well, have you
okay?
ever seen a manuscript where someone did try to force a theme and then maybe what that reader response was like as a result? Or even what type of reader response would be likely if a story was written that way?
I think so, as a developmental editor, I see manuscripts when they're in the draft stage, and then my work is to help writers improve them and to avoid that. So I don't often have writers come back and say, oh, by the way, drafts later, this went to beta readers. So, but I think readers would feel kind of repulsed
Mm,
by it, right? Like you would draw back if it were being forced, if it were being shoehorned in. I think readers are smart,
yes,
especially when they're attentive, right? So if you're trying to force your theme in there or any other story element, readers are going to pull back, step out of the story to go, wait a minute, why is that in here? Why is this character saying this or making that choice? We want the reader to be drawn into our narrative and pulled through it beginning to end smoothly without those hiccups where we stop and go, huh, I think I need to go Google that. Or now I don't really believe in this character. Or the author just lost some of my trust because I'm
yeah,
questioning something and I don't know what it is, right?
right.
But it's not making sense. It doesn't add up anymore. So that's the real danger of shoehorning things
Mhm.
into your story is losing your reader.
As a developmental editor, what are some of the ways you help your authors either identify their own theme or better bring it all together?
Mm. Yeah, so when I'm looking at a manuscript, I'm doing two things. I'm seeing what's on the page
Hmm.
and helping the writer to see what could be enhanced, what we could draw forward, as well as what maybe isn't fitting in the bigger picture. And then I'm also listening to the writer. So we're in conversation a lot.
Hmm.
I want to have a sense of the writer's vision for the piece and the writer's creative or artistic goals for it. So if a writer says, well, I want this story to be this, and I want the reader to go on this journey, then I'm going to say, here's what's on the page. How are we creating that? And by the way, you've also got these other things on the page that suggest to me you might be creating a different journey, right? You might be doing something else. So now the writer has to make a choice
Hmm. Have
because
you
neither
ever,
thing is right or wrong. It's how do we get everything that's on the page aligned so that we keep that reader flowing through the story, matching with your vision, right? Creating the story you want to tell in the most effective way possible.
have you ever seen a disconnect between what an author believes their theme is and what you pick up on as the theme?
Hmm. Yes, that does happen.
And then how do you address that in a supportive yet kind way?
Again, it's pointing to what's actually on the page. When I work with writers, I never try to say, this is, it's not a red pen
Right.
thing that I do, right? It's a conversation and it's an education. So I'll say, I see this as a weakness or as a disconnect, and here's why. Here's the evidence of what's on the page, or here's what's on the page, and here's what you told me, what I listened to you saying. So if we can revise this, right, in whatever way makes sense, then we're going to keep that alignment with your vision or improve the story because maybe the writer makes a different choice now, seeing
Oh,
new
yeah.
opportunities. I think the subconscious work that we're doing as we write sometimes is supporting the story that's organically forming and not necessarily the intellectual choices we're
Right.
making writing. So the writer says, so I had a writer who really wanted to write a thriller, but what I was seeing on the page was more women's fiction with some high stakes plot action to it. So I was saying to her, look at the characterization, look at the relationships, look at the way you're weaving your narrative together with all of these non-plot elements,
Mhm.
character and setting, and look at where the focus is and how much text you're giving this avenue versus that kind of thriller avenue.
Mhm.
And it wasn't that she shouldn't write a thriller, it was that that wasn't what was being birthed on the page. So her brain was saying, write a thriller. And her creative mind or her subconscious mind was doing all of this other stuff that was suggesting a shift in that decision, that kind of left brain thinking to go with what was forming organically.
Mhm. Well, can you give an example of some popular or common themes that you've seen either in books you've read or manuscripts that you've edited?
I mean, popular or common, I think anything that excites you can be a theme. I don't think I have examples of popular themes, but what I tell writers is to think about the question you are excited to address. What gets you fired up in your writing?
Mhm.
If you get excited about women finding their way in a world where the infrastructure is male dominated or something, if that what is what gets you fired up, you could write a story to that theme in any era of history, in any type of setting, whether it's familial or corporate or right. So, what gets you excited thematically? And
Mhm.
then what shape can that story take? And if we go back to Revolutionary Road, right, let's just
Mhm.
assume Richard Yates began with that question. So, if that's your question, doesn't it make perfect sense to have the couple who's young and excited and vibrant with lots of dreams find themselves pregnant and then move to the suburbs with the house and the job in the city and the second baby, right?
Mhm.
It just makes sense. Sorry, I think I just talked myself down a rabbit hole.
No, we love rabbit holes because, I just feel like you end up going down those rabbit holes, but then you discover something new and yet it is still relevant. And it starts making you think about all those other little offshoots of what else relates to this and what other questions can you ask and what else should I be looking at if I'm trying to find my own theme or solidify it on a page? Because, like we've already said, sometimes we might think that we have a theme already, but then as we go back, especially after we've taken some time away from it, and we've now thought about some of these questions on our own, it's probably going to be easier to think, okay, I also need to look at this, and I need to look at this. I need to think about it this way. Now I need to look at it as a reader and wonder, is there anything in here where it does feel as though it's preaching to me or handing down some lesson in a worksheet instead of telling me a story and letting me figure it out for myself?
Yes. Yeah, I love what you just said. And I think if we look outside of ourselves for theme when we're considering our own work and our own story, then we're already taking a left turn.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want a writer to be concerned with what other people are doing in their stories thematically. I would want a writer to look at what excites them and at the story they're writing and say, ask, what are the opportunities here? What is possible in this story?
Yeah, I would think one thing that might help too is if they had a mock interview with their main character. What do you want? What drives you? What is holding you back? If the world could be your version of the perfect place, what would it look like? And what's preventing it from having that shape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Do you see a lot of popular themes?
It depends on the genre. So, one is I do see lack of autonomy, or what would my world look like if I had freedom in fantasy, for instance, especially
Mm-hmm.
if there's some sort of caste system or it's highly selective in who has power or resources and who doesn't. So that one comes up a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. And, if we are writing in a genre that is more plot or character driven, then I wouldn't pick the theme based on what others do, but it might be perfectly fine for that common or popular theme
Hmm.
to emerge because
Yeah.
that's the story you're telling. But if you're writing in one of those more open-ended genres like literary or contemporary, and you really want to think about theme or explore that question through your narrative, then personally, I wouldn't look at what anyone else is doing. I would look within and say, what excites me? What do I want to explore? And what shape could that take through story?
Yeah.
And in my mysteries, theme is third. In, my historical fiction, theme is much more dominant. So
Mhm.
it depends on what we're writing and what we're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, which is great advice. Well, and before we end, can you tell us about the special offer that you have available for listeners?
Sure. So I've got a mini workshop called The Power of Subtext in Dialogue. And it's just 1 hour, but it is a workshop,
Hmm.
not a webinar, not a presentation. I definitely want people to come live and ask questions, and that will be coming up in February. And I would love to give people a 50%
Oh,
off coupon for that.
it's very generous.
So, well, it's a $19 workshop for 1 hour, but they'll get it for half off. So it's a pretty good deal.
I agree. I think that is a good deal. Oh, and thank you again. And then thank you also for that offer.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been great.
I agree. And thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes for more information about today's episode, including all of the details for that workshop discount code. And if you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, please don't forget to subscribe to the show, and I hope you listen again next week. Thank you.